think we can start. I will start by introducing myself. I'm sure other people will join in, whoever are trying to. So my name is Yogita Kapoor. I hope everyone can hear me well. I work with ISF Group, and this webinar today, Stress Management webinar, is brought to you by ISF Group. I'm one of your hosts, and with me, I have my team member Ian, who's a co host, Pushkal, who's a co host, and Pavan Kapoor, who is a co host and also the presenter. Let me start by sharing a little bit about what ISF Group is. ISF Group started with a non-profit charitable trust, Inner Search Foundation, about 20 years ago in the year 2000. We started with promoting and teaching holistic health, meditation, yoga as a way of life, and which then transpired into many workshops for corporates and individuals on stress management, leadership skills, teamwork, etc. Today, ISF Group comprises of a private limited company focusing on maritime and offshore industry and a charitable trust, which is Inner Search. And a lot of initiatives which have been launched in these two concerning training, education, research, health, sustainable development, consulting, etc. We've also dabbled into cultural programs like singing and dance for fundraising and otherwise. Very recently, we also released an album with 6 songs or bhajans which have been actually sung by a presenter here today. So this was about an introduction about ourselves. Let me tell you a little bit about this webinar today. The stress management webinar, we have a presentation by the presenter, Mr. Pavan Kapoor, post which we will take questions from the audience. Initially, all of you are on mute by the host, that is me. If anybody wishes to ask a question at the end of the presentation, they can raise their hand and we will unmute you so that you can interact with us directly. So I will request you to please keep this in mind. And just some more pointers from the program. As I already said, your mics are on mute and questions will be allowed towards the end. And if you're not able to ask your question due to time limitation or any other reason, you may send us a mail and we can definitely take up your question on day 2, which is tomorrow, and reply to you. The default screen with presentation in progress may look like something which is on right. So you see the screen with the shared presentation and the people on your right. You can move that around your screen to have the look more comfortable for you. So you can put it on top so you can see the full presentation for you. And you can also switch between the speaker face and presentation side and adjust the sizes as per your comfort. You can also remove the speaker's face from the screen to see the full view, just the presentation itself. Moving on, I would like to introduce the presenter, the trainer for today, Mr. Pavan Kapoor. He's a class 1 marine engineer and he has had a vast and varied working experience of over 27 years, which ranges from being a hands-on engineer to a workshop manager to a mentor and guide to a chief executive. Pavan has led teams of professionals and educationists for development of world-class training and educational establishments. He is the founder and head of ISF Group and the various entities within the group. So with this, I would like to hand it over to Mr. Pavan Kapoor. So I request you to please start. Thanks.
Thank you, Yogita. Good afternoon to everybody, and a very warm welcome to this first webinar that ISF Group is conducting. The topic, as you all know, is stress management through self-management. And the way we have structured our webinar is that we do about 90 minutes of a session today, and then we rather we have the second session tomorrow around the same time. Our intention would be to take up the introduction of the topic today, try and understand what stress exactly is, and then we look at some short-term fixes for mitigating stress. At the end of understanding stress session, we will break for a small question and answer session. And as Yogita has verbalized, that at that point of time, we would request you to raise your hands and we will unmute your mic so that you are able to ask questions and we can probably have an interaction at that point of time. So with this, I would like to begin today's session. I guess we all realize, we all understand that we are living in times which are absolutely unprecedented. none of us probably ever imagined that this is what we would be experiencing today. Uh, till 4 months back, or rather, I would say even up to 3 months back, in India especially, life was just about normal. Things were going on as usual till such time that this sudden change took place. And with each progressing day, you can see new things are emerging. And we still probably don't have clarity as to where we all are moving at the moment. There's a lot of uncertainty. We yet do not see light at the end of the tunnel, although from time to time we do get a glimpse of some improvement somewhere and something not happening good somewhere else. So when we talk about stress management, it actually becomes very relevant in the kind of times that you're living in now. In fact, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention in the United States has identified that the outbreak of coronavirus 2019 may be stressful for people. There's a lot of fear, there's a lot of anxiety about what may be happening, and that can actually cause strong emotions in adults and children. And they believe that if you're able to cope with stress, and people around us, if they're also able to cope with stress, then probably we become stronger and we are able to manage the situation far better. So, with that understanding, we begin today's session. Okay, I hope you all can see the screen well. If you look at disease, stress, and human beings, it's almost like a vicious circle. What we experience today, there's a pandemic around. Even if we are not directly affected by the coronavirus, yet the amount of information that is coming to us is at times overwhelming. And this actually can lead to a stressful situation for all of us. Stress, as we understand, starts to affect us human beings at physiological, mental, and emotional levels. And when this starts to happen, our immune system somewhere starts to weaken. So, if our immune system gets weakened, we would obviously be more prone to catching disease or being affected by the pandemic. So, in that sense, unless we bring in suitable interventions, which I'm sure we all do in bits and pieces in our life, in our day-to-day life, based on what inputs we get from various sources. But if we can do it more comprehensively, probably we can go through the situation far better. So, with this understanding, I begin the first session, which is what exactly is stress? As Yogyata mentioned, I'm a marine engineer basically, and I went through my 4 years of engineering. And we used to have a subject called strength of materials, in which we used to do some practicals in our first year of engineering. And one of the practicals was to subject a metallic piece to certain external force. So if you see, this is what the piece would look like. And it was basically put in a machine called universal testing machine. And then certain load would be applied to pull it apart. Now, as long as the load remained, the size of the metallic piece would tend to increase. Subsequently, as the load was brought down, the metallic piece would come back to its original size. Now, this is what typically we used to call as the resilience zone. That means the metal that we are talking about has the capability, when stretched because of external load, and when the load is released, it will come back to its original position. Interestingly, and you may probably agree, that different metals have different properties. So some metal would probably be extending or elongating more with the applied load, and with the same applied load, some other material would probably not stretch so much. But they all would have a kind of resilience zone where they are stretched, and as the load is released, they all come back to the normal positions. Resilience, by the way, is also what we refer to as toughness. Now, if the amount of load is increased further on the same metallic piece, a stage comes when on release of the load, the metal would not come back to its original position. So basically, its elastic limit has now been exceeded. And now it is any further load is only going to stretch it and make it permanently deformed. If the amount of load is further increased, then a stage would come where the metal will break at its weakest point. So this is a kind of test we used to conduct. And actually, we used to calculate what we call actually stress and strain for metallic pieces, which is a very useful science, especially if you want to understand in construction business, whether bridges, buildings, we use a lot of these metallic pieces which ensure that the buildings remain intact. So much about the science. Let me move on from here. If we try to apply the same thing to human beings, as human beings, we all in our lives are being subjected to external environment. And that environment could be various, could be different things for different people. There could be certain financial issues, there could be relationships, family, children, other issues. There could be difficult bosses and colleagues at our workplaces. There could be our commuting and work pressures, especially people like us who live in mega cities. Traveling all the way to office itself can be quite a stressful situation for many. It could be our own self created unrealistic expectations. Sometimes, as human beings, we may tend to create certain expectations of ourselves from ourselves. And if we are unable to meet them, that means they become like a challenge for us, which we have to face. There could, of course, be natural disasters, and there could be man made disasters. Now, of course, it's a subjective matter whether what we are going through today, COVID 19, is a man made one or a natural one. Most of us may agree that probably it is a lot of our own doing. But anyway, that's not the subject of today's discussion. So, with these challenges that we as human beings face, there could be many more challenges that you may come across or you may think about. I've only listed a few of them over here. Essentially, in our lifetime, what we do is we have an external environment and we are striving to perform, to achieve our aspirations, our goals, our objectives in these external environment. Now, where does stress come from? If you look at the situation here, the external environment creates what we may call as a performance demand. That means there is a certain demand which is put on us as human beings to be able to meet the challenge or the demands or requirements of the external world. We have certain capacities. Again, if you relate that to the steel bar that we talked about, each metal has got its own capabilities. Same way as human beings, we have our own capabilities. The capabilities may be real as we understand, or sometimes they could be also perceived capabilities. That means we may probably have the right potential, but in our minds, we do not feel adequate enough or strong enough to be able to meet certain challenges. So when we talk about human capability, we are referring here to something that we believe we can do or we cannot do. And the gap between the performance demand and the human capability is actually what we can say as a stress factor or the gap. That is the load that we are being subjected to externally. If our capabilities are such, and if we believe that we have the capability, physical, mental, emotional capabilities to be able to meet the performance demand, you can see the factor, the gap almost becomes negligible. In fact, if your capabilities exceed what the demand may be, which can happen in certain situations, then you will be having extra energy that is still there, reserve energy with you. But otherwise, if you're able to meet it, then the stress factor, the gap becomes far lesser, or rather it is not existing at all. On the other hand, if in our perception or in reality, if we feel that or we know that we don't have the capability, then the gap becomes far bigger. And this is almost like being loaded by a very strong external force from outside, which can actually create stress. So, before we go further, we would also like to very basically understand some functioning of our human system. We are not going to be talking about physiology out here. And what we'll discuss is purely functional. That means something that you and me as lay persons can easily understand. So we talk about the stress and our autonomic nervous system. Interestingly, uh, we probably know that, but we may never think about it, that there are so many functions taking place within our body. The heart is pumping all the time, the digestive system is working, the respiratory system is working. All these are functioning at all times. How do they happen? This happens with the help of our autonomic nervous system, autonomous as we call it. It has got two distinct branches. One is which regulates activity, they call it sympathetic nervous system. And the other one which regulates inhibition or relaxation mode is what we call as the parasympathetic nervous system. And both are actually designed by nature to work in harmony with each other. So let's go further and try and understand what really creates stress for us. But before that, let's look at the autonomic nervous system and our day-to-day living. During our days, we do so many activities. We work, we walk, we pray, we do exercise, we do home activities, we may play, we may take pets out for a dog, we may socialize. All these require certain amount of energy. And for the body to have the required energy and functioning, it is the sympathetic nervous system which actually gets activated, helping us perform these activities. On the other hand, when we get tired through work and we relax or we go off to sleep, that is the time the parasympathetic nervous system actually gets activated. And as we said earlier, they are both designed by nature to function in harmony with each other. It's almost like if you look at the balance, if we can balance our day-to-day activities with the help of activating the nervous system, which is sympathetic, and balancing with parasympathetic, we are perfectly fine. We are able to do what we want to do in our lives. We can achieve what we want to achieve in our lives. It's about creating a balance. So when one is active, after some time, we bring the other one active, either consciously or it happens unconsciously. But as long as that functions well, we are in perfect harmony. There's no problem. Before we go further, let's just observe this musical instrument. It's a stringed instrument, and I'm sure you'll agree that the purpose of this instrument is to create beautiful music. Now, just imagine for this instrument to create perfect music, each of the strings will have to be tightened, stretched to an optimum amount so that it can create music. If we try to overstretch the strings, obviously it will break. On the other hand, if we slacken the strings too much, it will not create any music. So if the string has to perform its duties, then it has to be, the instrument has to be, the strings have to be stretched to an optimum amount. This is an analogy which works very well if we remain aware of ourselves and we perform keeping this aspect in mind. That would be perfect normal situation. Where does the problem come in? The autonomic nervous system and threat or challenging situation. Now, if our mind perceives any kind of threat, now one of the threats, if we go back to our current discussion, COVID-19 actually has scared many of us tremendously. First is the disease itself, the fact that it is an epidemic. it is spreading, and we hear about certain deaths taking place globally, large numbers in some of the countries. So we are somewhere deep within are fearful of our existence coming to an end. That is one fear. The other fear could be related to something happening to those who are very close to us. Some of our children, our brothers, sisters, they may be in some other parts of the world. And as the disease is spreading, there's an amount of fear, there's an element of fear, hope nothing happens, nothing goes wrong with them. There could be further threat over here with the economic turndown which is already set in, that what will happen as we go further from here. So these are certain challenging or threatening situations which are coming up in front of us now. To meet these challenges, what happens to us? Depending on our personalities, two kind of responses can be given by human beings. One is what we call flight or fight response. I see a challenge, I see a wild animal, I see somebody who is threatening, and I'm prepared to fight it out, or I decide to run from there to escape. In both cases, our autonomic sympathetic nervous system again gets activated. If my personality is such where I may not feel adequate to be able to meet the challenge, what we call a possum or give up response. I'm kind of losing this situation, which can bring in some kind of depression. And this is what actually activates the parasympathetic nervous system again. Now, it's very important for us to understand that the same nervous system which regulates all the essential functions of the body also gets activated when our mind perceives. Now, I'm using this term very carefully here because you may have a real situation, but you could also create a perception which is rather just escalating that threatening situation. For example, if I am sleeping and I suddenly have a nightmare, we may have all experienced in our lives. If you go through a nightmare, suddenly sometimes you may wake up and you find your heart is beating very fast, you're sweating. What happens actually? At that point of time, your mind perceives a threat and it activates your sympathetic nervous system even while you were sleeping or dreaming actually. So you can imagine what goes on in our minds. Some of it could be real, some of it may not be real, but that also has a real effect on our physical systems. And if we do not intervene, if we are not aware and allow this to stop at the right time, then you may have an imbalanced situation, either sympathetic or parasympathetic. So now we come to actually defining what stress means. They say stress is a state of internal imbalance reflecting the unrelieved dominance of either the sympathetic, the arousal, or the inhibition, that is parasympathetic branch. Okay. So I think it's very important for us to understand whatever happens outside of us, depending on our personalities, when a certain kind of response is there from our side, it can lead to our nervous system getting activated. And if we are not able to remain aware of what's going on and get and create an intervention, then we would be in a state of imbalance. And if the imbalance remains for a prolonged period of time, we could be said to be under kind of a stress. And this is accompanied by a perception that one is unable to cope with external challenges. Go back to that performance demand and human capability. That is where the gap may tend to become bigger, creating stress more and more. Stress affects us at physical, mental, and emotional levels and can also be managed effectively if these aspects are healthy and integrated. Since the topic that we are dealing with is all about stress management through self management. In tomorrow's session, we'll be talking a lot about how to create a more healthy and integrated personality of ours. Awareness that we are slipping into a stressful situation is important for applying interventions. So, if we can remain aware that something is not going right, that is the time we'll be able to do something about it. Now, some of the symptoms which we may experience, by all means, the list is not exhaustive. By all means, all these may not always be a result of stress, especially the first two ones. The irregular bowel movements or diarrhea on the other side, it could be simply a case of bad food that we may have eaten. But I would just like to share with you, when we have the activity going on, normally the nervous system puts our excretory system on the back burner. Whereas when we are in a possum response with the parasympathetic working, it activates our systems which clean up the body. So this something like this could be happening because of a stressful situation, or could be simply a case of bad food. Hypertension, if sympathetic nervous system is activated for too long, one can develop, there's a sense of tightness in the body. We may tend to remain very tight, clenching our fist all the time. You may find there's tension out here. All this can lead to hypertension. If we are keeping our sympathetic nervous system activated for too long, we may get into a situation of fatigue. There could be headaches, there could be finally drop in performance. On the other side could be low blood pressure of sense of weakness, because in a parasympathetic mode, the blood pressure tends to drop, and we may probably not find enough energy going to all the parts of the body. The breathing may become very shallow. There could be irritability, difficulty in concentrating, forgetfulness, and tunnel vision. These are some of the symptoms which may exist or which may be showing if we are under stressful situation. So what we have broadly understood what stress is all about. Um, Before we go further, what we also need to just understand is that when we are talking about stress, before we start to feel the stress on our physical part aspect, that is the body, there is a perception which happens in our minds, which is important for us to understand. It happens in the mind followed by the body. So the way to tackle stress would be largely to work on the mind itself. Okay. So with this thought, let's take some short-term fixes. While we call them as short-term fixes, but what I would like to say is that some of these aspects may require a certain change in the way we are doing things today, in our lives. And we may have to relook at and readjust some of the aspects over here. So to begin with, I think you must reduce all exposure to media of all kinds. I think I am being a bit mild here to say reduce it. If you are in a position to absolutely shut it off, nothing like it. You may need some information which is vital for you to advise your family so that you can take required precautions or be prepared for something which may be even more challenging. But other than that, the more you sit in front of a TV screen today, and especially in India, where we may have almost God knows how many news channels playing all the time and dramatizing everything, and social media through various messaging softwares happening all the time, we need to bring an intervention here. And it's extremely important. So this is first thing that you must do: apply your willpower, reduce the amount of exposure that you're getting to what's happening around. Remember, no news is 100% perfect. So we don't even know whether everything that we are hearing or listening to, or watching on TV is really something to be worried about. However, whatever basic guidelines have been issued by the government following social distancing and other hygiene related guidelines, we must follow them diligently. Let's not try to feel that nothing will happen to us. So we must follow them as diligently as possible, but we must reduce the exposure to media soon as possible. Then we come to the aspect of our diet. We are at home most of the time. We need to balance our diet carefully, regulate it, choose wisely, and avoid overeating as a result of nervousness. You may find people who tend to become nervous sometimes just overeat. So we need to see if we can check this. We are There are a lot of guidelines around, a lot of inputs coming in as to what could be actually boosting our immunity. Uh, you may need to look into it. If some of those apply to your current lifestyle or the family can adjust to them, you may try them out. No harm. So it's important to have a discussion within the family so that we decide what is best for all of us. And avoid excess alcohol in the hope that COVID-19 will go away. Of course, in the Indian context, fortunately, unfortunately, the liquor shops are completely closed. In case you happen to be in some other country where this is happening, uh, please remember that there is no cure for COVID-19 through alcohol. And sometimes too much of alcohol can take us further into a depression mode also. So we have to just watch it out. Second important thing, we must take up exercise in moderation and do whatever you feel like. You want to dance, you want to do aerobics, some weights, yoga, anything else, or simply you want to walk. Now, some of us obviously are having an issue today that people can't even go out to walk within their own campuses or compounds. So we may have to really become a bit flexible here, but please try to put in some exercise so that the physical body, the joints remain active. It's important. And you could simply take up the household work actually, uh, which would do wonders today. Especially when you are in depression mode, it's important to start getting into some activity, because if you're sitting all by yourself thinking about what you may have watched on the TV or somebody else may have told you about, then your mind will just create havoc out of it. So best is take charge, get up, get into some activity. The opposite of parasympathetic is sympathetic. Parasympathetic is what takes you into relaxation mode. What you need to do is get into activity. You will start feeling better immediately. Okay, that is what is the second part. So we talk about shut the media off, get your diet in control, and of course the exercise. Remain engaged in creative work or even essential professional work. If your professional work is continuing and you love to do it, don't stop it. Remain as active as you can. But otherwise, if you are not into great professional work, see what can be more creative for you at this point of time. So you can take up some hobbies which you may have left away long time back. There's enough time now, you can do that. Spend quality time with the family, especially now that you have great deal of time. Indoor games, reading and storytelling, drawing and painting, music, watching movies and programs which are generally uplifting and less violent and depressing. Don't go and watch the movie Contagion. It's one of the famous movies few years back. I mean, it's not going to help you in any way. So you watch something which can take your mind off anything negative which is happening. You may say, probably, are we trying to hide? No, we are just trying to prepare ourselves. I'll take another small example here. In an aircraft, if there is lack of pressure, we always told that first, before you help somebody else, get your own breathing mask on. So all that we are trying to do here is to ensure that we keep ourselves hale and hearty, healthy, in pleasant state of mind, so that actually we can help somebody. So we will probably have to choose what kind of recreation activities we want to be in, but it should be positive, which can help you and help those around you. We now come to a very important aspect of stress management, which is about conscious relaxation techniques. And here I would like to discuss two things, ladies and gentlemen. One is deep diaphragmatic breathing, and the other one here is listening to soothing music while relaxing. And I'm going to take you through a small practical session on both these. First of all, let us try to understand what is diaphragmatic breathing. If you see a small baby who's newborn baby sleeping, you will find that as the baby inhales or exhales, it is the stomach of the baby which is moving. As the child, a baby inhales, the stomach tends to come out, and he exhales, the stomach tends to go in. Now, we all were born using our diaphragms effectively for breathing. And the diaphragmatic breathing actually is the most efficient way of breathing because in each inhalation, you're able to take in far more oxygen into your lungs as compared to just breathing by using your chest or your clavicular muscles, that is your shoulders, basically. So there is great deal of value of trying to revive the diaphragmatic breathing. And as you can see in the picture over here, it's a simple pose over here. You can lie on your back, keep your legs folded around the knees, keep one hand on your chest, and keep one hand on your stomach just below the rib cage. Maybe you can try this now as you all may be sitting on your chairs somewhere. You can just keep one hand on the chest and one hand just below your rib cage. Okay? Now, what has to be done is when you inhale, your stomach should be coming out, and when you exhale, the stomach should go in. I'll give you a few seconds now. Keep your hands on your chest and your stomach and just see if you can experience this, please. As you observe whether you are able to do diaphragmatic breathing, each time when you inhale, your stomach will come out, and when you exhale, your stomach will go in. I will now play a very short YouTube video which will further give you an idea of what we are talking about.
Place one hand on your stomach and the other on your chest. Take a deep breath in and push your belly and your hand outwards. Try and keep the movement of your chest to a minimum so you concentrate on the deep breathing. Place one hand on your stomach and the other on your chest. Take a deep breath in and push your belly and your hand outwards. Try and keep the movement of your chest to a minimum so you concentrate on the deep breathing.
May I request Yogita to advise whether you could hear the sound also of the video?
Yeah, I could. Yeah.
Okay, okay. So what we now do is I take you through a simple relaxation exercise using a music piece. May I request you all, wherever you may be seated right now, to just make yourself comfortable on your chairs as I play this music. You can use the sound control of your respective computers or devices to be able to adjust the sound to meet your specific requirements. We shall now take up a simple exercise which helps in developing concentration while remaining relaxed. We shall use a small piece of beautiful, soothing music to help us with this exercise. You may choose to sit or lie down or be in a relaxed position wherever you may be at the moment. Readjust yourself if you wish to, so that you are able to sit for a few minutes without any distraction. Very gently and slowly, you may now close your eyes. Let your mind scan your entire body from head down up to your toes, ensuring that your body is fully relaxed. Let your breathing also be relaxed. And now allow your mind to simply follow the music which is playing. Let it flow with the notes as they play on. If your mind tends to get distracted, very gently and slowly let it come back and continue to follow the music which is playing right now. Let go any tension which you find in your body or your mind with each exhalation of your breath. Let go. You may now very gently and slowly open your eyes. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. Um, I'm not very sure about the quality of the sound which was there, but this gives you some idea. You can, so many such pieces available. Whenever you choose, you can choose a suitable music piece, lie down somewhere. You could take a similar posture as you can see on the screen right now for practicing diaphragmatic breathing. Let the soothing music play and simply observe your breathing as that is happening. Slowly and gradually, as you're able to get your diaphragmatic breathing activated, it has immense benefits. One of the biggest benefits of diaphragmatic breathing is that since we charge our lungs with more oxygen during each cycle of inhalation and exhalation, it automatically lowers our blood pressure because the heart does not need to pump to that extent. The blood itself is charged with more oxygen, so that will be sufficient for it to travel and take it to all the cells within the body. So automatically the heart gets a signal that it needs to pump down as the blood is well charged with oxygen. So it has tremendous benefits. It helps you reducing the anxiety. It helps you in concentration, and especially when you use diaphragmatic breathing with music, and you're trying to follow the music, all the notes going up and down, your mind will start to get aligned, and it will not distract. It will not run here or there, So that is a great exercise in concentration, which can be taken up several times in a day, and especially now that we have the time available. The last set of inputs that I would like to give to you as a short-term measure is that try to spend some personal time in contemplation. Examine your hidden fears, your attitudes, and try to rationalize them. We need to try and put, see, mind has got so much of data stored in it, and it is basically active all the time. We have to develop the ability to be able to train the mind. It's an instrument. It's an instrument which we can't allow to overpower us, which it does many a times. So we need to develop the skill to be able to instruct our mind largely as best as we can to do what is needed to be done. And here, of course, if you find contemplating by yourself difficult, talk to your spouse, your friends whom you can trust fully. Very often, when you share thoughts and your fears and anxieties and worries, you may find solutions to them also. So, ladies and gentlemen, what we have talked about, some aspects, as we call them, short-term measures: reduce the media exposure, focus on healthy diet, take up some exercise, spend enough time in creative activities or recreation, take up relaxation exercises, as we just discussed, and spend some time in trying to rationalize your fears. I mean, we all know these bodies are not here forever. We all are fully aware of it. It's a question of getting our purpose right, which we'll discuss further tomorrow, and be able to train the mind, prepare the body and the emotions to be able to move forward. So with these thoughts, I would like to close the second session. So we take the topic of today. Once we complete this session, as Yogita mentioned, we shall have a small question and answer session. In case you have any questions, please put it up on the chat, or you may probably raise your hand at that point of time, and we'll be able to unmute your mics so that we can have a small discussion. So we move on from here. We talked about briefly before we closed up yesterday that we are talking about four aspects of our being. One is the physical aspect, the mental, emotional, and something that we are referring to as extra physical, which is beyond the physical self. So let's go further. Uh, all human beings, rather, I would say all living entities, have been fed with a basic program by nature. And nature has taken care of giving all of us this basic program so that we can survive here, whether it's human beings or animals, whatever the case may be. One is hunger, the food, sleep, sex, and self preservation. These are four primitive urges which we all are built in with, whether human beings or animals. The difference between us and animals largely is that animals generally remain under the framework that the nature has created of these four primitive urges. Whereas human beings have been lucky to have a very refined brain or mind, as you may call it, and we have the free will to do a lot of things. But animals do not have that freedom. How well we utilize the the additional faculty that has been provided to us is something that we shall see around. Uh, these primitive urges, if you see them carefully, are essentially for our preservation. Food, we need the food to survive. sleep, we need rest to be able to uh, catch up on our energy. Sexual aspects of our being basically is to ensure that there is a perpetuity of our I would say species, whereas self-preservation, which largely comes from fear, ensures that we do everything which keeps us safe. So this is what just keeps the whole show of this universe going on. We shall come back to this again, but in our framework, you will see that I have put the primitive urges right now under the emotional section. We shall, as we move further, discuss what is the relevance of primitive urges as far as emotions are concerned. Let's talk about the physical aspect of our being. Basically, you could consider this to be more like a machine. Our bodies are nothing more than machines, which have the cognitive senses. We have 5 senses of taste, sight, hearing, touch, and smell. And we have active organs, which largely are speech, hands, legs, excretory, and generative organs. So these are the 10 organs which help us function in our day-to-day lives. We get all the external information through the 5 cognitive senses, and we perform everything in our lives, in our lifetime, with the help of the 5 active organs. Also, if you look at the body to need to survive, just like any machinery, it requires fuel. So it requires the energy to flow in, which will help the body to work. When we perform, we spend energy, so we need energy which may come from food, from air, from various mediums, and that is how the system continues to function. When the energy flows in, it is the body's metabolism which basically processes that whatever we eat or drink or inhale, exhale, and that after processing, that energy is distributed to the entire body, which helps the body remain in active condition and help it perform its day-to-day tasks. So this brings us to the understanding of our physical being. We have now we talk about the mental aspects of ourselves. Let's try to understand human mind, which is one of the most important aspects of our being, and it's very complex. But as I told you yesterday, we shall not get into any great scientific or jargons out here. We will try to understand ourselves purely from a functional point of view, which is what you and me as laypersons can easily understand. So if you want to understand the human mind, think about an iceberg. An iceberg which you find in cold climates at sea typically has a small part of it which is protruding out of the water, but there's a large mass of ice which remains beneath the surface. So essentially, you can treat the mind to be somewhat like this structure. Now, before we go further, let's talk about what kind of states the human mind may actually be in at various points of time. Typically, what we have listed here, there could be 5 states. One state of mind is when the mind is very dull and stupefied. That means you're not feeling fresh enough mentally to be able to do anything, to think a lot. You could be tired physically, mentally. You could be under the influence of maybe alcohol, or you could be generally feeling very dull because you may have had certain foods which are not keeping you energetic enough to think. So mind remains dull. The second state of mind is what we call a chaotic mind. Now, we all understand that there is always something or the other which is moving in our mind. Some thoughts are always floating out there. But when a situation arises that you get diverse thoughts almost at a very fast pace, which create a kind of a chaos in your mind, and you're not able to even think clearly or decide something, that is what we may refer to as a chaotic mind. The third state of mind could be distracted. That means the mind is now able to focus on certain things, but there is a tendency for it to get distracted. It happens to all of us when we sit in a class. Maybe it is happening to us even at this point of time. You're sitting in a class, somebody may be lecturing out there, and suddenly the mind will drift somewhere else, and it happens all the time. But a distracted mind would still be referred to as something which is able to come back to a focused uh, state, but it doesn't remain there forever, so it keeps kind of drifting. The fourth kind of a mind would be where you are able to create a focused mind through certain efforts, and the fifth one is what we refer to as an effortless focus, where you develop a kind of ability or skill to concentrate, which is amazing, and yet you do not feel strained because you are trying to focus on something. I do not know if you ever, if you recollect when sometimes when we were in college or school and we were appearing for examination and we were busy either all by ourselves or with friends and trying to solve a very interesting problem, you would not realize how the time would pass. You become so focused on and so creative at that point of time. And actually, when you come out of that state, you may be in fact feeling fresh rather than feeling drained, having used your mind. So that is a state where we can be in effortless focus. So our minds could be in either of these states depending on what time of the day. It could be what we may have eaten, what kind of interaction I may have had with my acquaintances. Uh, there could be many reasons. And mind can be in either of the state. But if we are able to, with skillful practice, bring ourselves out of the dull and chaotic state to distracted and slowly start to develop focused mind, you start seeing that the quality of your decisions, the ability to think starts to improve radically. And that can be amazing as far as human achievement is concerned. When we talk about mind, it's also important. I showed you there were two parts of that iceberg. And the part which is protruding out, I shall tell you shortly, is what we call a conscious mind. That means at the moment, all of us who are there part of this webinar, we are largely using our conscious mind to be listening to something or to be talking about something. If your conscious mind is relaxed and calm, it is almost like this lake, where you can see right up to the bottom. And I'm sure you'll agree, if ripples start to get created, slowly the bottom may become a bit obscure. And if the water actually was not very clean, we would not have seen the bottom. So this becomes a nice analogy to understand our minds as we go further. Let's talk about the first important faculty of human mind. That is the memory part. As I said, what is protruding out is the conscious mind, and what is there beneath the water surface is our subconscious mind. Now, how does it function? Let's talk about the memory. And let's go back. I'm sure many of us would have learned how to ride a bicycle as small children. And if you are able to recollect how this all started, in the initial stages, we could hardly balance the cycle. There was always somebody holding the bike from behind, and instructions were being passed on, and we were trying to balance yet look straight and trying to pedal at the same time. And we were very conscious as we were pedaling, as we were watching in front. So the mind was fully involved. And slowly, as we kept practicing it, a stage came when we could start to balance the bicycle. Nobody had to support us, and we were then riding it without any efforts. Now, this happened after a period of time when we had already practiced it to a certain extent. After some time, a stage comes where you ride the bicycle without probably even thinking that you're riding a bicycle. That means your mind actually may be thinking about something else altogether, but the program which has been fed into your subconscious mind is now so well ingrained, so systematically structured, that it will keep guiding your body exactly how to ride the bicycle and continue with it. So this is what exactly is this? This is feeding the memory which goes into our subconscious mind and which helps us perform actions in the external world. Let me go further to try and elaborate what exactly I mean out here. How does the memory work actually? So we have the conscious subconscious mind. How does it happen? We use our five senses, what we discussed earlier, to actually provide input to our conscious mind. And from there, the input goes to subconscious and start to create. In fact, subconscious mind could be treated like a hard disk of your computer, which has got enormous capacity. So you don't have to worry about losing on the memory over there. So it creates a nice small corner where everything about riding a bicycle is going to be fully stored. And when you actually perform the action using your active organs, while your mind may still be thinking about something else, the program is brought to use and inputs are given to your physical self to be able to ride the bicycle. Something similar may happen whether you are finding a friend's house for the first time. Then once you have driven to his place for 10 times, next time you may not even be conscious that you're driving on X or Y roads, and you may be thinking totally about something else. So what really happens is this function of memory allows creation of habits, impressions about what is good, what is bad, what to do, how to do it, and so on and so forth. And repeated inputs create a create far stronger impressions, and thus we develop a particular personality. So, ladies and gentlemen, everything that you and I have been doing since we were born essentially has emerged from what is stored into our subconscious minds and how well we can bring that information back into the conscious mind to be able to function in the external world. That's the first important function of our mind. Let's go to the next one. Very important and very interesting also. We talk about ego. I'm giving it several names here. Why? Because ego we often use in a negative connotation. We say somebody is very egoistic. But ego essentially is the I maker, or we can say the self of identity. I'm sorry, the sense of identity or our own selves. So let's see how it happens. If we imagine our hard drive to be an absolutely clean hard drive when we were born, and then through the senses, as many inputs started to come in about this is my body, this is my name, this is my family, my friends, home, religion, culture, this is my school, college, these are my possessions. So this information starts to get fed into our hard drive day after day. And it further gets into our food habits, which state I belong to, which language I speak, which part of the country I come from, what are my values, what are my likes and dislikes, what is my job status, what is my financial status, how superior I am to somebody, how inferior I am to somebody, my spouse, my family, their shortcomings, their achievements. All these inputs continue to go into our subconscious mind through our conscious mind. And this is what, if you ask, who am I? You may probably come back and say, I include all this. I am just not the body, but I am also a person who has this body, who has this name, who has this family, who has these friends, and so on and so forth. So, what is wrong in ego? Really speaking, there's nothing at all wrong in ego. Ego gives us the identity so that you and I can function in our life. Everything that we need to do, we will require to know who I am to be able to function effectively. Let's move on to the third important element or faculty of our mind, the intellect. We call it the wise one. Okay, let's have a look. A human being also has the power to discriminate and choose. We talked about the memory, something which is being stored. We talk about the sense of who I am, the identity, and we also have the intellect, which is helping us choose between A, B, C, D, so on and so forth. and we do it through our intellect. When trained and applied appropriately, this faculty will help in supporting right decision making, regulating the primitive urges. I'll come to that again, choosing what should go into my mind and what should not go into my mind, and also managing the ego. We shall discuss about this faculty as we move further. But for now, I just wanted you to understand that when we talk about the mental aspects of our being, these are the three main faculties: our memory, which includes our perceptions and habits, our ego, and our intellect or discriminating faculty. Okay, let's move further. We are emotional beings. All human beings, we have emotions. Actually, we talked about earlier animals also being under the influence of the four primitive urges, but somewhere animals, not all of them, but certain species also have intellect. They are also emotional, but probably the emotions and the aspect of intellect may be developed in some cases, not so developed in other cases, you know. But as human beings, we are the privileged ones, you know. We have these faculties which are highly refined. So emotions are also our feelings, and feelings emerge. Feelings come spontaneously. Feelings don't tell us and come. I'm not going to get a message today that 4 o'clock in the afternoon, please get angry, you know. It doesn't happen like that. I may see something, and if that does not fit into my schema of things and it does not meet my expectations, there is a likelihood I may lose my temper. It's a possibility. So emotions are spontaneous. They come automatically. They don't tell that they are coming. But interestingly, you may have probably heard of something called emotional intelligence, you know. We are now talk about not just IQ, but also about EQ. And if as human beings, we can start to develop the skills of becoming more intelligent as far as emotions are concerned, we see a lot of benefit in being able to manage our own emotions and those of our close ones and our colleagues and our subordinates or our bosses or whatever it may be. Now, of course, emotions can be negative, which include anger, vanity, greed, jealousy, hate, guilt, shame, sadness, or they could be positive: selfless love, joy, empathy, hope, happiness, and high self esteem. As I said earlier, these are purely feelings. This is what we feel, and feelings are extremely important to us. All that memory which you and me have in our storehouse, of course, many old memories also bring out emotions in us, you know, which could be negative or positive. They do play a role, but again, they emerge, you know. We don't think about that what time I would like to bring out so and so emotion in myself. So we have negative and positive both emotions, uh, which which we are subjected to. Now, if you see, I am choosing right now to put the emotions across the emotional and extra physical aspect of my being, you know. And I shall again come back, and probably we'll be able to see why we are doing something like this. Let's move on further. Now we talk about the extra physical, which you can also refer to as spiritual aspects. I would also like to say that this is something like a higher urge. This is not just urge to find food or sleep or sex or self-preservation, but it is to go beyond. It is to go beyond the mundane, basically. There's perpetuity of life. If we ever try to examine ourselves, how many of us really would like to die? We would like this honestly to go on forever. We would like this life to never end, especially when we're having good times going, you know. Although sometimes you have bad times, you may have contrary thoughts, but otherwise there is, in fact, there's an old saying that a human being should live for at least 100 years, you know. Now we have no clue whether this ever used to happen or not, but if life is managed well, then one could live long. But the point that will come up is, live long for what? Is it live long to keep maintaining the body, or is it to use the body to be able to do something which is outside of the body? Body is just an instrument. But if there is a thought of perpetuity of life because you truly want to do something big, yes, it comes from some kind of an inspiration that you may have. There's a sense of peace. We all are somewhere also looking deep within. Deep within, we all are looking for peace. We're looking for evolution. We don't just want to remain where we are. We're looking to be creative, to create. And finally, we're looking to achieve the highest possible in our lives. We should be driven by purpose and willpower. So these are some aspects of our being which one could say like extra physical, because this is something which may not be there in a memory actually, or it has to come from somewhere. We may see somebody, we may talk to somebody, we may get inspired. I would just like to also make a mention of something important over here. And probably that will also explain to you why I chose to keep the positive emotions on the extra physical side. Every achievement, every human achievement in life is only because of positive emotions. You cannot achieve anything if you are not having that positive emotion within. If you're not having a purpose which is driven by your willpower and you want to attain something, could be simple thing like getting promotion, creating a large corporation, building a house for your family, doing something for your parents which you feel so strongly to do. All these things come from emotions, positive emotions. So now we have got the entire scheme ready out here. We have got the physical self, which is the instrument. We have the mental aspect, which is the memory, perceptions, ego, and intellect. We have the emotional aspects. Now we need to see. Negative emotions largely emerge when our primitive urges are not regulated. Imagine if you don't get food in time, you may bear for a while, or if you may not, if you're very fussy about certain kind of food and you don't get that, people often become angry. If you're deprived of sleep or you oversleep, you either become dull or you become a non-performing person. If there is obsession with sex or if there's total deprivation of sex, either way, human mind becomes imbalanced. If you are thinking all the time how to protect yourself or you just do not care about it, both may tend to create some kind of a negative emotion in certain situations. Whereas the positive emotions will largely come from extra physical aspect of our being. So let's move on from here. Let's have a look at interplay of our internal faculties. What really goes on here? One thing now, let's go back and see. I am connecting the ego with the self-preservation. And what happens really? So if we ask ourselves this question, when we talk about self-preservation as human beings, are we only all the time looking at trying to protect our physical self? You may get an answer out here. Often, rather most often, when we talk about self, we mean all the inputs which are there, everything which is there around our sense of identity. We try to protect that. And that is why we call somebody is not very open to ideas, because he's got a fixed, in fact, ego acts and self-preservation combination acts more like inertia. Inertia is the state of a body to either keep moving or stay at rest. Okay. So essentially, the combination of ego and self-preservation can be actually detrimental. And this can prevent growth of a human being. Let's look at now. The primitive urges, as I said, if they are not kept regulated, if you overindulge or you deprive yourself, that can create negative emotions. Negative emotions will start to affect your body. When we are angry, the heart starts to beat very fast, the breathing becomes very strong, and so on and so forth. It starts to impair the body. Negative emotions will create further inputs into your subconscious mind, which will be of negative nature. So essentially, if you go back to what we discussed yesterday, for us to be able to deal with external situations which may be challenging, we need to see how we can integrate our entire being far more effectively so that we are able to remain strong and remain resilient and not get affected by the external forces so much. So this interplay can be very complex. I've still tried to show it in a very simple terms out here. But when you have such interplay happening, we kind of remain distracted. First of all, uh, if you notice, sometimes we may be thinking about something else and doing something else. We are so charged up with emotions that we are not able to think rationally. So too many negative emotions prevent you from thinking properly. And also, of course, feed in negative inputs into your mind. Emotions will also affect your body. So it's kind of a it's like a continuous negative play which takes place, preventing us from remaining integrated. This is what we'll talk about when we discuss self-management aspects. Thank you, everybody. So we come back to the last session where we talk about stress management through self-management. So let's have a look. We have now got a broad understanding of what we are at various levels. What are the various aspects of ourselves? And some of you who may be actually working in the corporate sector or maybe in leading positions, um, you may agree with me that it is like having the various aspects that I discussed briefly. It's like having a team of about 14, 15, or 20 people, each one with a different personality, wanting to do different things. And unless we manage them well, we will not be able to achieve what we don't. If we don't manage them well, then we don't create a cohesive organization. Interestingly, word organization comes from the word organism, and you, me, we all are organisms. So and of course, when we talk about COVID-19, can you imagine a small tiny fellow who is not even visible, what kind of havoc it can create in the system? So let us see how we could actually create an immune system which is strong enough and create a cohesive, integrated physical, mental, emotional, spiritual being which can ward off any external threat at all times. And I go back to what I discussed with you yesterday briefly. Breath plays a very important role in human beings. And interestingly, we all have been breathing from the time we came out of the mother's womb, and we shall till such time we pack off and leave from here. So that is something we are doing all the time. But most of the time, we are not even conscious of it. We have all taken it for granted. Breath is so important that you can stay without food for hours, but if you just block your breath, you can't stay without breath for more than a minute or 2 minutes. And interestingly, if you see your mind, which comprises the primitive urges, ego, habits, etc., it is linked to your body. When your body is weak, sick, you will find that you tend to become irritated. You may tend to start losing kind of hope. So that is a mental emotional aspect which is happening. Body became sick, it had a negative impact on your mind. At the same time, if mind is agitated, for example, you're angry, then it is bound to affect the body. Blood pressure goes up, you start to shiver, body becomes tense, so on and so forth. So mind and body, when I say mind here, I'm talking about also the emotions. Mental, emotional, physical states are all connected with each other, and they reflect what goes on within each one of them. And interestingly, Whenever the body is sick and you get irritated, your breathing pattern changes. When you're angry, body becomes agitated, breathing pattern changes. I do not know whether you were able to experience yesterday when we had a short relaxation exercise. When you breathe calmly and remain focused and relaxed, you can immediately see that your physical being is also feeling more relaxed. So breath is the link between our physical, mental, emotional aspects, and that can come to your help if we need to start entering into our system. Because remember, we all identify with the body. It's not easy to get inside our minds into the subconscious and try to find out. You can go into a computer and check up what lies in the hard drive, but the human hard drive, it's not so easy. But you need to find a way to access that to be able to make interventions out there also. So breath will come handy. When we talk about self-management, what does it include? It includes taking up practices which help the mind attain a focused or effortless focus state. Now that's very important. I go back to again what we discussed. A dull or stupefied mind, a chaotic mind, and also the distracted mind, they will not help you achieve what you want to do. So first thing is to try and get a focused mind, a state of a focused mind. So any practice which is going to help achieving that, it should be taken up. Reorganizing and re-engineering ourselves. This is something I will talk about when I go back to the entire schema that we have discussed. Assessing one's short-term and long-term goals and objectives and finding purpose. Many of us suffer on account of not being clear what do we want out of life. If people have purpose which is clear, you can create wonders. If we are lacking on purpose, we are just here spending our time. And finally, applying the general principles of stress management diligently and with sincerity. So let me take you back to this interplay of our internal faculties. Now, if I was to take over an organization like this, and I want to achieve certain objectives, for example, when I say I mean each one of us, any one of us. What could we do? We need to first reorganize ourselves. We have talked about the intellect or discriminating faculty. If I take you back to the previous one, somewhere the intellect has been put aside. Our primitive urges, the ego, have got an understanding that let's play some dirty game out here. And as they start to play a dirty game, they affect us emotionally, physically, and so on and so forth. Now, if you take over this organization, which I'm sure we all would like to do so, so we first get ourselves organized, move the intellect to a higher position. That's a wise one, because the intellect is finally going to guide us as to what to do. And if you see, we have suddenly got the extra physical urges which are managed, and now they come right on top. So we seek perpetuity, we seek peace, we seek evolution, we seek creation, we seek to achieve the highest through purpose and willpower. Unless we set some higher goals for ourselves, if the goal of life itself is simply to take care of the body and maintain it till such time the time comes to say goodbye, which finally is going to come, there's no doubt about it. We're not here. In fact, it's also important, that's why, to find out that whether this physical being or mental emotional being is all that I am. Perhaps we can take that at some other stage, that discussion. But for now, if you push the higher urges, recognize them in yourself, and start to work in that direction, get your intellect into a dominating position. Regulate your primitive urges through your intellect so that you don't overindulge, you don't deprive them at all. Ego is essentially there to give you a sense of who you are, but keep the ego boundaries clear so that you can still learn more new things. As I said, it's a hard drive. which is free of cost, and it has got unlimited capacity. Okay, so that came as the OEM package right in the beginning. So we can use it to no ends. We can just completely at all times keep using it. So let your intellect guide, let the ego be there, tone down, in control, primitive urges being taken care of, no overindulgence, no deprivation. Immediately you will find that the negative emotions will start to tone down. Higher urges will ensure that your extra physical aspect, which is there, is going to guide positive emotions. And as I said, positive emotions create. Everything big has happened through positive emotions. And of course, regulate the input and output into your body. What I mean is that we take energy through food and the other means to the extent that I need. If you take too much of energy and you don't consume, there's an issue. If you deprive yourself there and don't, and you keep working, there's going to be a problem there. So it's a lot about getting the right persons on top and then giving instructions to whosoever. Each one has got a job to do. Body has a job to do, urges have a job to do, so on and so forth. Let them do their jobs. Let them not take over the charge from you. I'm going to leave you with one question out here. If I say don't let them take over you, then where exactly you are at the moment in this scheme, this is what you need to figure out. And of course, as you can see, the breath is across physical, mental, emotional, and extra physical aspects. So be conscious of your breathing, take up the practices as frequently as possible, and you shall start to see that the system is getting more and more integrated with each passing day. So I go back to the general principles of stress management we took yesterday with slight modifications. Not just media, but manage inputs in line with your purpose. Once you have a purpose clear, then you decide what has to go in, what should not go in. That's very, very clear. It's up to you to choose what should be coming into your system. Diet is very important, and I would again stress upon it without giving any specific instructions as to what has to be eaten. But you must eat fresh food, well cooked, not overcooked, not undercooked, and eat in moderation, something that you can digest. By the way, all of us as we get older, the digestive fire starts to reduce. So we can no longer digest everything that we used to do as youngsters. So I think with progressing age, we should become more conscious about what our system can accept, what it can't accept. That would be the broad input I would like to share with you. Exercise, very important. But again, as we start to get older, we may not take up exercise, which can actually damage our being. Uh, One thing which is very clear, uh, body finally deteriorates, but it's all about doing something which can, at various stages of life, which are relevant for that stage of life and which the body can take. So again, we must be conscious of what exercise we take, watch for some time, what are the reactions that body is giving. If it is finding difficult to take it, then modify the exercise, but remain physically active so that the system moves. All machinery has to keep moving all the time. Recreation, very important. With the family, creative activities, music, uh, cultural activities, whatever you love to do, be involved in that. This is going to, it's interestingly, recreation actually is recreations of cells. There is a tradition in India, especially for those who may not be here from the Indian side, from India as a country. When a woman is expecting a baby, we normally say maintain a very healthy and calm and quiet environment around, because they say that affects the baby which is to be born, yet to be born. In our body, there are cells which are taking birth and dying almost on perpetual basis. We are getting reinvented, recreated all the time. So if our mental, emotional states remain healthy, fresh, happy, then the new cells which are taking birth will also be healthier. It's a simple logic and it works beautifully. Self introspection, we discussed yesterday. Examine your fears, examine where your ego is becoming an obstacle. It is becoming too rigid for you to do new things, to open up, and that's important. And finally, we take conscious relaxation, and I'm adding something what we call meditation out there. So uh, we go back to our core principles. Different only is that you have to apply them with more diligence and with utmost sincerity to be able to achieve what you want to achieve. So what we'll do now is I'm going to play a very short clipping, audio clipping, which actually exists on our website of Inner Search Foundation. And I would request you to just sit wherever you are on the chair comfortably and follow this. Okay, so I'm on the website of ISF Inner Search Foundation. I hope you can see my screen at the moment. I'm sure. Okay, so I'm going to play this audio clipping. As I said yesterday, you can adjust your sound system to see what is comfortable to you all. Okay.
Having taken the position on the chair, with your head, neck and trunk in a straight line, and your shoulders relaxed, and your hands resting on the knees or thighs, gently close your eyes. Withdraw your mind from all other places and let your mind just be aware of the place where you're sitting down right now, feeling the touch of your body against the chair. Withdraw your mind from all other spaces and let your mind just be aware of your entire body from head down up to the toes. Feel your entire body from within. Let your mind now travel to the center between the two nostrils and let it simply observe the flow of breath in your nostrils as you inhale and exhale. Do not try to alter the pattern or rhythm of your breathing, but just be an observer of your breath. Let your mind now travel to your forehead region and relax your forehead and entire face and facial muscles. Relax your neck region, your shoulders, shoulder joints, arms, wrists, palms and fingers. Relax your neck region, your chest and cardiac region, your diaphragm, your stomach and navel region, your lower abdomen and lower back, your thigh joints, thighs, knees, calf muscles, ankles, heels and toes. Your entire body is now relaxed. Move your attention back to the center between the two nostrils and let your mind continue to feel and observe the flow of breath in your nostrils as you inhale and exhale. With each exhalation, feel as though you are getting rid of all the tensions, your worries, and your toxins from the system. And with each inhalation, you're filling your body, your system, and your mind with the vital cosmic energy which makes you feel complete. Continue to breathe, focusing at the center between the two nostrils and with the same feeling as long as you find it comfortable. If your mind tends to wander in between, very gently and slowly, without any struggle, let it come back and focus at the center between the two nostrils, feeling and observing the touch of breath. Before you decide to conclude this session, very gently raise your palms and rub them together, and then cup your eyes with your warm palms for a few seconds, and then slowly, as you take your palms away, you may gently open your eyes. Try to maintain the same feel as long as it is possible. Thank you.
Thank you all. Welcome back. Um, just a few more pointers, ladies and gentlemen, before we break. There's a saying that meditation can do for us which nothing else can do. It introduces us to ourselves at all levels. The benefits that one would derive are improved concentration and clarity, improved health, improved interpersonal relationships, and increased spontaneity. Of course, there are enormous benefits. I've only listed a few of them out here. But even the simple practice that we just followed, and again, I'm repeating because this question came up about faiths. If you notice, the instruction for meditation also is purely very scientific. We're talking about the breath, following the breath, which we all breathe in any case, okay? When you sit for meditation, you may choose, you must have seen a picture as the audio was playing. If you are choosing a kind of a chair where you can sit straight with your back also keeping straight, that would be most ideal. Um, you need to consciously relax your body. And why we request or recommend closing your eyes, because the moment you close your eyes, you are cutting off one set of senses, so that your distraction will start to reduce and you will be able to concentrate more, far better. And then, of course, you need to um, regulate your breathing. In the initial stages, I would again like to recommend, as I mentioned, we mentioned in the audio, that do not alter the normal rhythm of your breathing. Don't try to take longer breaths forcefully. It is not important. Do not give pauses between inhalation and exhalation. Let them be like a smooth sine wave, Inhalation flows into exhalation and so on and so forth. And let the rhythm be just normal what you have, depending on your physical condition, your mental state. So do not force it at this stage. When you start to practice diaphragmatic breathing using Makarasana, crocodile posture, or the other postures which we discussed today, and you also take up some meditation during the course of the day, again, because this question came up for the asana, I would like to say that avoid practicing even meditation with a very heavy stomach. Uh, Best is to do it when the stomach is light and you have least distractions from your body itself. Only then you'll be able to concentrate on your breathing and go gradually within yourself. So that's all, ladies and gentlemen, from my side. Thank you. Have a great evening.